What happens when a single stolen kiss broadcast to the world becomes the detonation point for an entire dynasty? This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of Damien Blackwood, a billionaire titan who had the world at his feet, and the two women who held his fate in their hands. One, the brilliant and fiery business rival he couldn't resist. The other, his pregnant wife, the quiet architect of his success. In the blinding flash of a Gala spotlight, a single moment of passion was meant to seal a historic business deal. Instead, it ignited a war for love, loyalty, and a billion-dollar empire, proving that the most dangerous secrets are the ones hidden in plain sight. The penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home and more a monument to sterile perfection. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view of Manhattan, the city lights a sprawling, indifferent galaxy below. For Anna Vance Blackwood, it was the loneliest vista in the world. At 8 months pregnant, she felt more like a delicate, prized possession, placed carefully within the apartment's minimalist decor, than its mistress. Every surface was cool marble or polished chrome. Every piece of art an investment. Every silence heavy with the things her husband, Damien Blackwood, left unsaid. Damien moved through this world like he owned it, because in most respects he did. At 35, he was the charismatic, razor-sharp CEO of Blackwood Industries, the tech behemoth his father Aidan had built from the ground up. But Damien had taken it into the stratosphere. He was a darling of the financial press, a visionary whose name was synonymous with ruthless innovation. And he was, to the outside world, the perfect husband. Tonight was the Starlight Children's Foundation Gala, the crown jewel of the New York philanthropic season. Anna's gown, a bespoke silver silk that cascaded over her swollen belly, lay across the bed. It felt like a costume for a role she was no longer sure how to play. "You're not ready yet." Damien's voice, smooth and impatient, cut through the quiet. He stood in the doorway of their cavernous bedroom, already immaculate in a Tom Ford tuxedo. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp, and his eyes, the color of stormy seas, were fixed on the tablet in his hand. "Almost," Anna replied, her voice softer than she intended. She rose slowly, her hand instinctively resting on the curve of her stomach, where their son kicked gently. "He's active tonight." Damien glanced up, his focus momentarily shifting from stock tickers to her. A flicker of something, was it affection or just reflexive duty, crossed his face. "Good. A future CEO needs to have energy." He offered a thin smile and went back to his screen. The comment, meant to be a compliment, landed like a stone in the pit of Anna's stomach. It was always about the future, the legacy, the dynasty. Their son was not yet born, but his role had already been cast, the heir to the Blackwood Empire. Her role, it seemed, was simply to be the vessel. It hadn't always been this way. She remembered the man who had pursued her 5 years ago, the Damien who had seen her Anna Vance, the art history major, with a quiet wit and a family whose old money name lent his new money ambition a veneer of respectability. He had listened to her, laughed at her jokes, and held her as if she were the center of his universe. But with every billion he made, every company he acquired, a piece of that man had been chiseled away, replaced by a cold, calculating strategist. His latest obsession was Phoenix Innovations and its fiery CEO, Isabella Rossi. The name was a constant presence in their home, a ghost at their dinner table. Isabella was everything Anna was not: a self-made titan, fiercely competitive, breathtakingly beautiful in a way that was sharp and dangerous. She was Damien's equal, his rival, and as Anna deeply suspected, his obsession. "The Phoenix deal is closing tonight," Damien announced, snapping his tablet shut. He finally looked at her, really looked at her, but his gaze was distant. "We're announcing the merger at the Gala, a joint keynote. This will be the biggest tech merger in a decade. It solidifies everything. It solidifies your connection to her." Anna thought the bitterness a coppery taste in her mouth. She had seen the way he looked at Isabella in photos, the way his name was linked with hers in gossip columns they both pretended not to read. "Dynamic duo," one headline had called them. "The king and queen of Silicon Alley." "That's wonderful, Damien," she said, smoothing the silk of her dress. "A legacy for our son." She used the words she knew would resonate with him, the language of his ambition. "Exactly." He strode over, placing a perfunctory kiss on her forehead. His cologne was a familiar, expensive scent that no longer brought her comfort. "Aiden will be there. He'll finally see that my vision for the company surpasses even his own." The mention of his father tightened the knot in Damien's jaw. Aiden Blackwood was a man of old-world principles. He respected strength but despised recklessness. He had founded the company on handshakes and integrity, and he viewed Damien's high-stakes corporate raiding with a kind of weary disapproval. He adored Anna, seeing in her the grace and stability his son seemed to be casting aside. "I called your father earlier," Anna said quietly, "just to check in. He said he was looking forward to seeing us." Damien's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why would you do that? He's your father, Damien, and my father-in-law. I like talking to him." The defensive edge in her own voice surprised her. "He's a sentimentalist, Anna. He doesn't understand the scale of what we're doing tonight, what I'm doing." He adjusted his cufflinks, his reflection staring back at him from the mirrored wardrobe doors, a king surveying his domain. "I need to go ahead to meet with Isabella and the press. My driver will take you. Don't be late. The announcement is at 10. He was gone before she could reply. The silence he left behind was heavier than before. Anna walked to the window, placing a hand on the cool glass. Below, the city glittered a universe of infinite possibilities. But from up here in her gilded cage, she felt trapped watching her husband orbit a star that wasn't her. A sudden fierce wave of protectiveness for her unborn child washed over her. It wasn't just for him, she realized. It was for herself. She would not be a footnote in the story of Damien Blackwood. She had Vance blood in her veins, a legacy of her own, and a quiet strength Damien had long forgotten he once admired. As she turned from the window, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Aiden. "Anna, my dear, I have a feeling tonight may be difficult. Know that you are not alone. I will be there for you. Always." A tear traced a path down her cheek. She wiped it away, her resolve hardening like steel. She didn't know what the night held, but Aiden's message was a lifeline. She wasn't just a wife or a mother-to-be. She was a Vance, and she was a Blackwood by marriage. The empire was as much her son's as it was Damien's, and she would not let it or her own heart be shattered without a fight. Isabella Rossi did not enter a room. She conquered it. While Anna was cocooned in her silent penthouse, Isabella was holding court in the presidential suite of the St. Regis, a whirlwind of focused energy. Dressed in a striking crimson gown that hugged her form, she was a living embodiment of her company's name, a creature of full housefort and rebirth. Her team of assistants, lawyers, and publicists fluttered around her, but her attention was fixed on the man in the reflection of the mirror as she fastened a diamond earring. Damien Blackwood. Her history with Damien was a novel written in ashes. They had met at Stanford, two fiercely ambitious scholarship kids with chips on their shoulders, and an insatiable hunger to prove themselves. They had been lovers, intellectual rivals, partners in ambition. Their romance was a conflagration, brilliant and all-consuming, but doomed to burn out. Damien, for all his talk of breaking the mold, was a traditionalist at heart. He saw his future, and he knew it required a certain type of wife. Anna Vance, with her pedigree and placid grace, was the perfect choice for the dynasty he planned to build. Isabella, the daughter of an immigrant mechanic from Queens, was not. His choice had wounded her, but it had also forged her. She had poured every ounce of that pain and fury into her work, founding Phoenix Innovations, with a single burning purpose to build an empire so vast that Damien Blackwood would one day have to acknowledge her not as a spurned lover, but as an equal, or better, yet a superior. And now that day had come. The merger was her masterpiece of strategy. For months, she had played a careful game, a corporate seduction that mirrored their past. She had dangled the prospect of a partnership, a joining of their formidable powers, knowing it was an elixir Damien couldn't resist. He saw the merger as his coronation, the final step in eclipsing his father's legacy. He was blind to the fact that he was merely a pawn in her long game. "The final contracts are ready for your signature, Ms. Rossi," her lead counsel, a sharp man named Julian, said, holding out a leather-bound portfolio. Isabella turned her dark eyes glittering. She took the pen, and her signature flowed across the page, a work of art in itself. "Excellent. Send a copy to Damien's suite. Let him see it's done. He'll want to sign his at the Gala for the press," Julian noted. "I know," Isabella said with a wolfish smile. "But I want him to know that I've already committed. It makes it more intimate." Every move was calculated. Every word, every glance was a weapon. She knew Damien's weaknesses because they had once been her strengths. She knew his vanity, his desperate need for his father's approval, and the deep-seated insecurity that drove him to conquer everything he saw. She also knew that the embers of their past attraction had never truly died. All she had to do was blow on them. The kiss, she had decided, would be the final perfect flourish. It would happen on stage under the full glare of the lights, just after they announced the birth of their new corporate giant. It would look spontaneous, a moment of overwhelming passion between two visionaries, celebrating their triumph. The press would devour it. It would cement their image as the new power couple of the tech world. But its true purpose was far more sinister. It was a message aimed directly at two people. The first was Aidan Blackwood. She knew the old man despised what he saw as her brash, reckless ambition. The public display of intimacy with his married son would be a deep personal insult, a confirmation of all his fears about Damien's lack of moral fiber. It would drive a wedge between father and son at the most critical moment. The second target, of course, was Anna. Isabella pictured her the serene, pregnant Madonna watching from the audience. The kiss would be a public declaration of her irrelevance. It would humiliate her, shatter her composure, and prove to the world and to Damien who the real queen was. A broken, hysterical wife was of no use to a man like Damien. Isabella was counting on it. "Is everything in place with the offshore accounts?" she asked her financial advisor in a low voice, turning away from the others. "Wire transfers initiated. The shell corporations are clean. Once Blackwood Industries' stock surges tomorrow after the announcement, we begin the sell-off. The leveraged buyout can commence within 48 hours. This was the real merger. Not a partnership, but a hostile takeover disguised as a romance. She would use Damien's own inflated stock price, triggered by the news of their union, to break his company, buy up the fractured pieces, and absorb his Emma into her own. He would be ruined, and she would rise from the ashes of his making, the ultimate revenge. She looked at her reflection once more. The woman staring back was a predator. She had sacrificed everything for this moment. Love, friendship, perhaps even a piece of her soul. But as she thought of Damien choosing Anna, of being dismissed as not good enough for the Blackwood name, a cold fire burned away any trace of regret. "Time to go," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "Let's go make history." As she swept out of the suite, her crimson gown trailing behind her like a river of blood, she felt a thrill of anticipation. Tonight she wouldn't just be standing in the spotlight with Damien Blackwood. She would be setting his world on fire, and she would be the only one left standing to watch it burn. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a symphony of excess. Crystal chandeliers dripping with light hung like frozen constellations over a sea of New York's elite. The air buzzed with the murmur of 1,000 conversations, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the relentless, strobing flash of cameras. This was Damien Blackwood's natural habitat, a stage where power, wealth, and influence converged. When he arrived with Isabella Rossi on his arm, a palpable shift occurred in the room. They were a supernova, drawing all light and attention to themselves. His classic commanding presence was the perfect foil for her fiery, audacious glamour. Whispers followed them like a wake as they moved through the crowd, Damien greeting senators and banking moguls with an easy charm. Isabella, matching him smile for smile, her wit as sharp as the cut of her gown. Anna arrived 20 minutes later as instructed. The driver had dropped her at the main entrance, and she walked the red carpet alone. The press, having already captured their prize shots of Damien and Isabella, paid her scant attention. A few photographers half-heartedly snapped her picture, their expressions clearly labeling her the wife. She felt a familiar pang of invisibility, but tonight it was laced with a cold, simmering anger. Aidan's text was a talisman in her pocket, a reminder that she was not as alone as she appeared. She found her table, Table 1, the seat of honor, and saw the place cards. Mr. Damien Blackwood, Ms. Isabella Rossi. Her own name was seated further down, next to a junior board member and his starlet girlfriend. It was a subtle yet brutal repositioning of her status. She took her seat, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Across the room, she saw her father-in-law, Aidan, standing near the bar. He was speaking with an old family friend, but his eyes met hers over the crowd. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod, a silent promise of support. The gesture fortified her more than any champagne could. At precisely 10 o'clock, the gala's host took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed, "tonight we are honored to witness a historic announcement from two of the technology world's greatest visionaries. Please welcome to the stage the CEO of Blackwood Industries and Mr. Damien Blackwood, and the CEO of Phoenix Innovations, Ms. Isabella Rossi." A torrent of applause erupted as Damien and Isabella ascended the stage, bathed in a brilliant white spotlight. They stood at the podium together, a portrait of unified power. Damien spoke first, his voice resonating with confidence. He spoke of the future of innovation, of synergy. He praised Isabella's genius, her tenacity, her vision. "Together," he declared, "Blackwood Industries and Phoenix Innovations will not just lead the future, we will build it." Then it was Isabella's turn. She was mesmerizing. She spoke of partnership, of shared dreams, of breaking boundaries. She looked directly at Damien, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "Damien Blackwood is a force of nature. He sees not what is, but what could be. and in that vision I found a true partner. Anna watched from her table, her hands clenched in her lap. The performance was flawless, the chemistry undeniable. It was a carefully crafted narrative for public consumption, and the audience was eating it up. She could feel the ripple of excitement, the feverish typing of journalists capturing every word. "And so," Damien concluded, taking Isabella's hand, "it is my profound honor to officially announce the merger of our two great companies. We are now one." The ballroom exploded. The applause was deafening, the camera flashes a blinding, continuous storm. It was the moment of triumph. Damien had craved the pinnacle of his career. On stage, he turned to Isabella, his face alight with a euphoric, adrenaline-fueled glow. The world had shrunk to this single, dazzling point in time. There was only the roar of the crowd, the heat of the lights, and the woman standing beside him. Isabella looked up at him, her eyes shining with what looked like adoration, but was in fact the cold, hard glint of victory. This was it, the moment she had orchestrated. She leaned in, her lips parting slightly, caught in the overwhelming tide of the moment. The applause, the victory, the culmination of a months-long battle. Damien forgot everything else. He forgot his pregnant wife, sitting 100 feet away. He forgot his father's stern warnings about honor and propriety. He saw only Isabella, the woman who had challenged him, matched him, and who now stood beside him as his equal. He lowered his head, and their lips met. It was not a chaste, celebratory peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, filled with a history of fire and a future of calculated betrayal. The cameras went into a frenzy. The kiss was on the jumbotrons on either side of the stage, a 10-foot-tall monument to his indiscretion. The sound in the room changed. The applause faltered, replaced by a wave of sharp intakes of breath and excited, shocked whispers. This was more than a business announcement. This was a scandal, a soap opera playing out in real time, for a moment that stretched into an eternity. They were the only two people in the world locked in a public embrace that sealed his fate. He was at the absolute zenith of his professional life, and in the very same instant he had triggered the complete and utter demolition of his personal one. The kiss lingered a fraction of a second too long, broadcast in high definition for the entire world to see. From her seat at table 1, Anna felt the blood drain from her face. It was one thing to suspect, to feel the cold distance and see the lingering glances. It was another to witness it displayed as a public spectacle, a confirmation of her deepest fears and insecurities. The air in her lungs turned to ice. The room, with its glittering lights and hushed whispers, began to swim before her eyes. For a horrifying moment she thought she might faint. Then she felt a firm, grounding hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see Aidan Blackwood standing beside her, his face a mask of cold fury. His eyes were not on her, but fixed on the stage, on his son. He had seen it all. "It's time, Anna," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through her shock. "Show them your strength." His words were like a splash of icy water. Her grief, her humiliation coalesced into a diamond-hard point of resolve. He was right. She would not be the weeping, forgotten wife. She would not be a victim in their drama. She was Anna Vance Blackwood, and she was the mother of the heir to this empire they were so casually desecrating. With a grace that belied the turmoil in her heart, she pushed her chair back and stood up. Aidan offered his arm, and she took it. Together they turned away from the table and began to walk not towards the nearest exit to flee, but towards the grand arched entrance at the far end of the ballroom. Their movement was slow, deliberate, and it began to draw attention. People turned from the stage, their gazes following the stately progress of the patriarch and the heavily pregnant wife. On stage, Damien and Isabella finally broke their kiss. The roar of the crowd had changed the applause, now mingled with a stunned electric silence. Damien, still high on the moment's triumph, was momentarily confused. He looked out at the sea of faces and saw that they were no longer looking at him. They were looking past him towards the back of the room. He followed their gaze, and his world stopped. Framed in the grand doorway, as if in a perfectly composed portrait of judgment, were two figures. His wife Anna, her silver gown shimmering her pregnancy a stark, undeniable truth, and beside her his father Aidan, his hand resting protectively on her arm, his expression one of glacial, unforgiving wrath. They hadn't stormed in. They had simply appeared. A silent, powerful tableau that instantly upstaged the drama on stage. The 1,000-watt spotlights might have been on Damien, but every ounce of power in the room had just shifted to the entrance. The camera flashes which had been focused on the stage now swiveled in a frantic, clicking wave towards the door. Damien felt a cold dread claw its way up his spine. He saw Anna's face not contorted with tears as he might have expected, but calm, composed, and utterly unreadable. It was a terrifying serenity. It was the face of a woman who had passed beyond pain and had arrived at retribution. But it was his father's eyes that truly gutted him. In them, he saw not just anger, but a profound, bottomless disappointment. It was the look a king gives a prince who has just proven himself unworthy of the crown. In that single glance, Damien understood that he had not just betrayed his wife. He had shattered his father's faith and jeopardized the very legacy he had sought to secure. Isabella, ever the strategist, recovered first. A flicker of annoyance crossed her features. This was not part of her plan, but it was quickly replaced by a mask of cool indifference. She had wanted to destabilize Damien's world, and this dramatic entrance, though not of her making, served her purpose perfectly. The more chaos, the better. A hush fell over the ballroom. The whispers died. The only sound was the frantic clicking of 100 cameras capturing the collision of these two worlds, the triumphant adulterers on the stage, and the silent, judging family at the door. Damien took a half-step forward, his mouth opening as if to speak. But no words came out. What could he say? The evidence of his betrayal was being broadcast on the screens behind him. A grotesque instant replay of the kiss right next to the live feed of his wife's stoic face. Then Aidan and Anna began to walk forward. They moved slowly, parting the sea of stunned socialites, their path aimed directly at the stage. It wasn't an escape. It was a confrontation, and every single person in the room knew they were about to witness the spectacular implosion of the Blackwood dynasty. The walk from the entrance to the foot of the stage was perhaps 200 feet, but for Damien it felt like a mile-long march to his own execution. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, a ringing void filled only by the sound of Aidan's hard-soled shoes on the polished floor, and the soft rustle of Anna's silk gown. Damien's mind raced cycling through a frantic Rolodex of excuses, justifications, and damage control strategies. It was the lights, the moment, a misunderstanding. But as he looked at Anna's face, now only feet away, he knew that no excuse would suffice. Her calm was more damning than any tirade. It was the calm of a final judgment. Aidan and Anna stopped directly in front of the stage, forcing Damien and Isabella to look down at them. Aidan ignored Isabella completely, his gaze fixed on his son with a look of pure steel. "You have disgraced our name," Aidan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried with terrifying clarity in the silent room. "You have disgraced your wife, and you have disgraced the memory of your mother." Each sentence was a physical blow. Damien flinched. The mention of his mother, a woman Aidan had revered, was the deepest cut of all. "Father, listen." Damien began, his voice hoarse. "No!" Aidan cut him off sharply. "You will listen. You will leave this stage. You will get in your car and you will go home. You will wait there for me. Do you understand?" It was not a request. It was an order from the man who was in that moment the true king of the Blackwood Empire. Damien, the titan of industry, the man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets with a single word, found himself utterly powerless. He looked from his father's iron gaze to Anna's quiet strength. He was a boy again, caught and condemned. He gave a jerky, barely perceptible nod. Aidan then turned his attention to Anna, his expression softening instantly. "My dear, let me take you home." He offered his arm again, and Anna took it. She gave Damien one last look, a look devoid of hatred or anger, but filled with a profound and devastating finality. It was a look of pity. Then she turned, and with Aidan as her shield, she walked away. The crowd parted for them once more, a silent, gawking honor guard at a funeral for a marriage. As they exited, the spell was broken. The ballroom erupted into a cacophony of frantic, excited chatter. Cell phones were out. People were tweeting, texting, uploading photos. The scandal was already rocketing across the internet. Damien stood frozen on the stage, the spotlight that had been his moment of glory, now feeling like an interrogation lamp. He turned to Isabella. Her expression was unreadable, a cool mask of composure. "Well," she said, her voice a low murmur, meant only for him. "That was certainly more dramatic than I anticipated." "Isabella." He started looking for an ally, an anchor in the storm. "Don't, Damien," she said, her voice suddenly businesslike, devoid of the warmth she had projected moments before. "This is your mess, a family matter. I think it's best if I distance myself from it." She gave him a brisk, professional nod. "Our teams will be in touch tomorrow to finalize the merger details." She turned and walked off the stage, with a poise that was almost chilling, leaving him utterly alone in the glare of the lights. He was toxic, a liability, and she had severed her connection to him with the surgical precision of a CEO cutting a bad investment. The journey from the plaza back to the Park Avenue penthouse was the longest, most silent trip of Damien's life. He sat in the back of his Maybach, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. He tried calling Anna's phone. It went straight to voicemail. He tried Aidan. The call didn't even go through. He had been blocked. When he arrived, the penthouse was dark and silent. He called out Anna's name, his voice echoing in the marble foyer. There was no answer. He walked through the vast, empty rooms. In their bedroom, he saw that the drawers of her dressing table were open. Her jewelry box was gone. On the bed where her silver gown had lain just hours before was a single sheet of paper. It was a legal document, a petition for divorce citing adultery. It was dated a week ago. The realization hit him like a physical blow knocking the air from his lungs. She had known, or she had suspected enough to have this prepared. She hadn't decided to leave him tonight because of the kiss. The kiss had simply been the signal to execute a plan that was already in motion. The public nature of his transgression was just the final irrefutable piece of evidence she needed. He sank onto the bed, the legal papers trembling in his hand. He had believed he was the master strategist, the one in control of every variable. But he had been a fool. His wife, the quiet, unassuming woman he had relegated to the background of his life, had outmaneuvered him completely. And his father, the man whose approval he so desperately craved, had been her accomplice. The sound of the front door opening made him jump. It was Aidan. He walked into the bedroom, his overcoat still on his face, grim. He didn't look at Damien. He looked around the silent room, at the empty closets and bare surfaces. "She's gone to the Vance estate in Connecticut with her parents," Aidan said, his voice flat. "She's safe. She doesn't want to see you." "I can fix this," Damien pleaded, scrambling to his feet. "Father, I can fix this. I'll apologize. I'll do anything." "Fix this?" Aidan's voice was laced with contempt. He finally turned to face his son. "You broke this, Damien. You broke it with your arrogance and your hubris. You think this is just about a kiss. This is about a pattern of disrespect, of neglect. You put that woman," he spat the word, "and this deal before your family, before the wife who is carrying your son. There is no fixing that." Aidan strode to the window and looked down at the city. "Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., emergency board meeting. Be there. The merger with Phoenix is on hold, pending a full review." Damien stared, aghast. "You can't do that." "The deal is done. It's the biggest moment in the company's history." Aidan turned back, his eyes like chips of ice. "The biggest moment in the company's history was when you publicly humiliated your pregnant wife and brought shame upon our name. The board will be concerned about your judgment, about your fitness to lead." The threat was clear. This wasn't just about his marriage. It was about his crown. His father was not there to console him. He was there to deliver a declaration of war. The Blackwood Industries boardroom on the 80th floor was a place of power, a stark contrast to the opulence of the Gala. It was a cold, minimalist space, dominated by a 30-foot slab of obsidian that served as a table. Through the panoramic windows, a grey, unforgiving dawn broke over Manhattan. The mood inside was just as bleak. Damien arrived at 7:55 a.m., his face pale and drawn, his expensive suit doing little to hide the fact that he hadn't slept. He had spent the night replaying the disaster in his mind, the images of Anna's face and his father's contempt burning behind his eyes. He still clung to the belief that this was a problem he could solve with logic and force of will, the same tools he used to conquer the business world. The board members were already assembled, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and stern disapproval. These were titans of finance and industry, men and women who prized stability and predictability above all else. The front pages of every major newspaper and the lead story on every financial news network that morning featured a picture of the kiss, with accompanying articles questioning the stability of Blackwood Industries' leadership. The company's stock was already plummeting in pre-market trading. Aidan sat at the head of the table, a position he had not occupied in 5 years. As chairman emeritus, his presence was a powerful statement. He commanded the room without saying a word. The seat to his right, usually Damien's, was conspicuously empty. At precisely 8:00 a.m., the door opened again. But it wasn't a lawyer or an assistant who entered. It was Anna. If Damien had expected to see a woman broken by grief, he was mistaken. She was dressed in a tailored navy blue maternity dress that was both professional and elegant. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, immaculate bun. Her expression was calm and resolute. She was not here as a wife seeking pity. She was here as a stakeholder, demanding accountability. 2 formidable-looking lawyers, one of whom Damien recognized as the most feared divorce attorney in New York, followed her in. A stunned silence fell over the room. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. Damien felt a fresh wave of dread. This was an ambush. "Anna!" Damien started rising from his seat. "This is not the place. Please sit down, Damien." Aidan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Damien sank back into his chair, his authority in this room, his room completely stripped away. Aidan began. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We are here to address a crisis of leadership. Last night, our CEO, my son, demonstrated a catastrophic lapse in judgment, both personal and professional. He has exposed this company to ridicule and instability, and has jeopardized a merger that was predicated on a stable transition." He gestured towards Anna. "Furthermore, he has alienated a key shareholder. I'm not sure if you are all aware, but as part of their prenuptial agreement, and as a gift from me upon the news of my grandson's impending birth, Anna Vance Blackwood is the controlling owner of a 12% stake in this company." Gasps rippled around the table. 12%. It was a massive block of shares, enough to swing any major vote. Damien stared at Anna dumbfounded. He knew she had shares, but he had always considered them a symbolic gesture, a formality. He had never imagined she would wield them as a weapon against him. Anna's lawyer stepped forward, placing a file in front of each board member. "My client, Mrs. Vance Blackwood, has instructed us to file a motion of no confidence in the CEO," the lawyer stated coolly. "His reckless behavior, which is now a matter of public record, proves he is not fit to act as a fiduciary for the shareholders." "This is absurd," Damien exploded, finding his voice. "My personal life has no bearing on my ability to run this company. The Phoenix merger is a brilliant move that will double our value." "Will it?" It was Anna who spoke, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of steel. Every head turned towards her. "Or will it destroy us?" She paused, letting her question hang in the air. "I have never interfered with the business of this company. I trusted my husband's vision, but I am also the daughter of a man who ran one of the oldest investment banks in this city. I was raised to understand that character and business are inextricably linked. A man who cannot honor a vow to his wife and his unborn child cannot be trusted to honor his duty to his shareholders." Her words were precise, devastating. She was not emotional. She was analytical. She was framing his moral failure in the only language these people truly understood, the language of risk. "The merger with Phoenix Innovations," she continued, "was presented to this board as a partnership of equals. But my husband's relationship with Ms. Rossi suggests a profound conflict of interest. Was his judgment clouded? Did he give away too much in negotiations? Was he so eager to seal the deal that he failed to see potential threats?" Damien watched, horrified, as the seeds of doubt she was planting took root in the expressions around the table. He had been played. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a boardroom coup orchestrated by his wife and his father. Aidan spoke again. "I second Anna's motion. We need to put the Phoenix merger on hold and launch an internal investigation into the terms of the deal and the CEO's conduct. In the interim, I propose we install a temporary leadership committee to ensure the stability of the company." The room was a tinderbox. Loyalties were divided. Some members loyal to Damien's aggressive high-profit strategy looked uncomfortable. Others from the more conservative old guard, who had always been closer to Aidan, nodded in agreement. Damien felt the walls closing in. He had walked into his boardroom as a king and was now being tried as a fool. His affair wasn't just a personal failing. It was being expertly reframed as a business liability. He looked at Anna, truly seeing her for the first time in years. The quiet, graceful woman he had married was gone. In her place was a formidable opponent, a woman with Vance's shrewdness and Blackwood resources fighting for her son's legacy. And he had no one to blame but himself. The war had begun, and he had just lost the first most critical battle. The boardroom meeting was a bloodbath. The motion of no confidence passed by a narrow margin, a victory for the Aiden-Anna alliance, secured by a few wavering board members, spooked by the stock's freefall. Damien was stripped of his CEO duties, pending the results of an internal investigation. He was effectively locked out of his own kingdom. He spent the next 48 hours in a self-imposed exile in his silent penthouse, a ghost rattling around his gilded cage. He was inundated with calls from a frantic Isabella, her cool composure finally cracking as the multi-billion-dollar merger she had orchestrated began to crumble. He ignored them all. Her betrayal felt sharper somehow than Anna's. Anna was fighting for family, for legacy. Isabella, he now suspected, had been fighting for something else entirely. The summons came on the third day. A single text from Aiden. "My study. Now." The old Blackwood estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was where Damien had grown up. It was a sprawling stone manor that represented the old-world power and integrity Aiden cherished. Aiden's study was the heart of the home, a room of dark wood, worn leather, and the smell of old books. It was a room where Damien had been both praised and punished as a boy, and he felt a familiar dread as he walked in. Aiden was standing by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. But he was not alone. Anna was seated in one of the large leather armchairs, her hands resting on her stomach. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear and steady. "Sit down, Damien," Aiden commanded. Damien remained standing. "I want to talk to my wife. Alone." "I am not your wife anymore, Damien," Anna said, her voice soft but firm. "Not in any way that matters. I am the mother of your son and a shareholder in your company. That is the capacity in which I am here." Aiden placed a thick, bound file on the mahogany desk between them. "The investigation I initiated is complete," he said. "It was illuminating." Damien scoffed. "An investigation into my private life?" "No," Aiden replied, his voice dangerously calm. "An investigation into Isabella Rossi. I started it 6 months ago when I first heard the rumors about you two. I hired the best private intelligence firm in the country. I wanted to know what kind of woman was threatening my family." He slid the file across the desk. "You should read it. You were so blinded by your ambition and your lust that you never once stopped to ask who Isabella Rossi really was." With trembling hands, Damien opened the file. The first few pages were what he expected, photos of him and Isabella at discreet dinners leaving the same hotel confirmation of their affair. But then the report deepened. It detailed Isabella's financial history, her network of shell corporations, her ties to ruthless venture capitalists known for hostile takeovers. And then he saw the plan laid out in black and white. Financial analysts hired by the investigators had reverse-engineered her strategy. The merger was a Trojan horse. The terms, which he had seen as generous, were designed to create specific legal and financial loopholes. The plan was to use the post-announcement stock surge, a surge created by his own company's reputation, as liquidity. She would then use a network of offshore funds to short Blackwood stock, initiate a leveraged buyout, using Blackwood's own assets as collateral, and seize control of the company. She wasn't merging with him. She was consuming him. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place with a sickening thud. The kiss. It wasn't a moment of passion. It was a strategic masterstroke. It was designed to create the maximum possible scandal to trigger a crisis of confidence in his leadership and to send the stock price into a volatile spiral she could exploit. It was meant to make him look unstable, reckless, and emotional, the perfect target. He had thought he was her partner, when in fact he was her prey. He looked up from the file, his face ashen. He looked at Anna, who was watching him with a sort of clinical pity. "You knew," he whispered. "Aidan showed me the preliminary report 2 weeks ago," she confirmed. "That's when I had the divorce papers drawn up. I knew you wouldn't believe it. You were too enamored with her, with the idea of the two of you as conquerors. The only way to save the company, to save our son's legacy, was to take you out of the equation." The cold, brutal logic of it all crashed down on him. The public confrontation, the emergency board, meeting the motion of no confidence, it had all been a desperate high-stakes gambit to save the company from his own catastrophic blindness. They hadn't just been punishing him for his infidelity. They had been performing emergency surgery on the empire he had nearly given away. He started, his voice cracking. The arrogance, the certainty, the power he had worn like armor had all crumbled, leaving him exposed and hollow. "I'm sorry, Anna. I am so sorry." Anna looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of the old sadness crossed her face. "I know, Damien, but sorry doesn't unbreak a vow. It doesn't erase the humiliation. And it doesn't change the fact that you were willing to risk everything our family has built for a woman who was playing you for a fool." She rose slowly from her chair. "The board is meeting tomorrow. Aidan will nominate me as interim CEO. He will back me. The old guard will back me. I will save this company." Damien stared at her, at the woman he had underestimated in every conceivable way. She was no longer just his wife. She was his successor, born from the ashes of his failure. "What about me?" he asked, the question sounding pathetic even to his own ears. Aidan answered, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You will take a leave of absence. You will check yourself into a wellness retreat. You will disappear from the public eye. And you will fight to one day earn the right to be a father to your son. As for your place in this company..." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "That is a question that may never be answered." Damien Blackwood, the billionaire titan, stood in the center of the room, stripped of his power, his wife, and his pride. He had flown too close to the sun, and the woman he'd thought was the sun had instead been the flame that melted his wings. As Anna and Aidan walked out of the study, leaving him alone with the evidence of his own destruction, he finally understood. The real Blackwood legacy wasn't about mergers or stock prices. It was about character, and he had proven to have none. The empire was safe, but the king was dead. And so the empire was saved not by the king, who nearly lost it, but by the queen he cast aside. Damien Blackwood's story is a powerful reminder that the brightest spotlights can cast the darkest shadows, and true power isn't always found in the boardroom. Sometimes it's in the quiet, unbreakable resolve of a heart that's been wronged. Anna Vance Blackwood didn't just reclaim her dignity. She claimed an empire, proving that the most underestimated person in the room is often the most dangerous. What did you think of this story of betrayal and revenge? Could you see the final twist coming? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this incredible tale of drama and destiny, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger than fiction. Don't miss what's coming next.